if you're driven about something. I'm competitive, yes, because you derive satisfaction if you win on something. And if you're not competitive, that means, you're blasé. There's just nothing really matters to you. I mean, it's not just racing. I mean, we have businesses, and you want to be able to thrive.
That was Mario Andretti. Mario is a racing legend, considered one of the most successful racers in history. He's the only driver to win the Daytona 500, the Indy 500, and the Formula One World Championship. He was named Driver of the Century by the Associated Press. The Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. has added him to its Living Legends list, and his 1969 Indy 500 winning race car is currently in the Smithsonian. Mario's Italian roots and early life in a refugee camp likely contributed to his strength and determination. Today, the Andretti brand extends beyond racing. Mario has a winery, a petroleum business, and it's no surprise, a growing global motorsports presence. Let's learn where Mario's intense drive comes from and why resilience is key to keeping his motor fine-tuned and his brand vibrant.
I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, and we elected to launch this podcast because we know older adults have such inspiring stories and wisdom worth sharing. We have now all learned that social connections are critical to our well-being. This podcast is made possible by 50 Forward, the leading resource for adults 50 plus in Middle Tennessee who seek to live longer, more fulfilling lives.
You're listening to Squeeze the Day, where we talk to extraordinary people over the age of 50 who are living their best life now. Their stories of a well-lived life are both inspiring and encouraging to all of us as we seek to navigate a meaningful and purpose-driven second chapter in our life. Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. I'm Susan Sizemore, Communications Director for 50 Forward, so let's get started. Mario Andretti, welcome to Squeeze the Day.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you join us. Let's talk a little bit about your career. You've become the greatest race car driver in the world. For 36 years, you raced. You won 111 races and were named the driver of the century by the Associated Press. How did you get on top and stay on top for 36 years?
Well, just plain desire, and desire and love for what I was doing. I could never get enough of driving a race car and race cars of different disciplines. Motor racing is rich of several top-level disciplines, and I was curious, not just to specialize in just one and remain there. I just wanted to get a feel for what was going on, across the fence or across the street. And again, just because I just wanted more and more and more. And I was fortunate to be able to align myself with top teams, which you need the equipment, you need a team that's capable. And I was able to win in different categories, which is the ultimate reward, as you can imagine. Not just to race there, but to be able to win in something that's not basically your specialty. I derived just tremendous satisfaction out of all of that. And the sport gave me all of that.
Sounds like you love the sport and the science of racing.
All of it, yes, indeed. I mean, it's also incredibly fascinating. Our sport has, I keep saying, it has so many moving parts. It's very technical, as you can imagine, the car. But then look at the team that you need behind you to be able to support it, to be able to provide you with equipment that's capable of bringing results. So all of those components are not easily obtainable, because it takes so much of it to come together. And I look back at, I didn't do all these things by myself. I had a tremendous amount of help, so many people that obviously I'm indebted to for providing me and giving me that type of support and the knowledge for me to be able to take advantage of everything possible in a very competitive environment. But going back to all of it, I was just so totally driven. I mean, today I love the sport like nothing else, and still driving, still in the race car now and then. I was in a Formula One car a couple of weeks ago, and I drive the two-seater race car and IndyCar races and whatever. So I got my feet in it at this stage of my life. So as you can see, I still have a little bit of an itch to scratch now and then.
Will you tell us a bit about your roots?
Well, buckle down because it's a little complicated. Actually, we as a family were the product of World War II. Basically, where I was born, the region after the war, because Italy lost the war, was annexed to communist Yugoslavia. Italy lost that territory. And basically, you had two choices: one, to remain and succumb to hardline communism, or leave with just whatever you could carry. Basically, leave everything behind. And it was daunting situation for my dad, especially. He was administrating 7 farms with like 2,100 acres of land total it was a family holding, and left everything. And basically, became refugees in our own country. We wound up in Lucca, with there was a refugee camp with there were about 1,800 other refugees from that region. But Italy absorbed refugees from that region pretty much everywhere, because part of my family wound up south of Florence, and we wound up in Lucca. It was 2 years after the war ended, and all of this took place. I was 8 years old, 7.5, 8 years old when we left for Lucca, and we were there until 1955. In 1952, there was an uncle on my mother's side who had immigrated in the States, many, many years before. And we kept correspondence with him. And he suggested to my dad, why don't you come to the States and I will act as sponsor, which you had to do in order to be able to obtain a visa. So my dad applied for a visa, and 3 years later, the visa came through, and it was decision time. And okay, now we're going to America. Which again, I think ultimately from a negative, it became a positive because America really provided a future for us. I don't think even from all of the goals that my brother Aldo had and so on and so forth by becoming race drivers, I don't think we could have realized that America was going to provide a true American dream for us. My dad kept saying, I'm doing this for your own future. And we had an older sister, Anna Maria, who, again, we all benefited from that. And so here again, a potential negative became a positive ultimately because we made a good life of it here. I think it brought some values to the forefront for us as kids, just realizing how much my dad felt that, he sacrificed because he could have, it'd have been fine to just stay there. But all along, he kept saying that I'm doing this for your future. And he was right.
There's a lot about that story that many people might not know. And now that you've shared it, do you ever look back and say that really helped shape the Mario Andretti that I am today?
Oh, I think so, for sure. I mean, first of all, when you reflect on it, realizing what my dad was going through, how unselfish he was in that respect, thinking of us. And, he was only in his 40s, but in those days you thought, okay, the 40s is pretty much the end of your life. But Aldo and I were just teenagers, and Anna Maria, actually, my sister celebrated her 21st birthday as we were coming into the New York harbor, and about 5 a.m, a beautiful June day, and that's it. That was quite interesting, to go back and think of those days because of her birthday, actually.
What a memory. You referenced Aldo. Let's talk a little bit about him. I read something about the role of a parking garage near the refugee camp, and I want to know how that whole story came about in that relationship that kind of might have launched your racing career.
Well, in so many ways, Aldo and I, we were just always interested in cars, so to speak. We became interested in racing at a very young age, and there was a garage across the square. There were basically, the camp was an old college, and that's where we were all housed. And It was right inside the walls of Lucca next to a Basilica church. And so the garage was repairs, but also parking. And we would hang out there, and we befriended the owners, and Beppe and Sergio. And they were allowing us to park cars that were valet. And, I could hardly reach the pedals, but there was, we had fun doing that. And then in 1954, like a year before we came to America, they took us to Italian Grand Prix in Monza. And we saw, this international race. Of course, Formula One and Ferrari was prominent. Ferrari, Mercedes, Maserati, all the brands. And my idol was obviously was able to see him firsthand, Alberto Ascari. Didn't get to meet him, but nevertheless, that race really sparked something in us. Aldo and I had pretty much the same goals, the same ideas, and the same passion that was developed right there. And from there on, we just, in our own mind, we had no plan B as far as the pursuit in life. And that was very, very meaningful. And as life went on, we always remained friends with these individuals, whenever we would visit back in Italy and so forth. But how meaningful that relationship was in so many ways, as you can imagine, because it made some things happen that seemed to be pivotal, I think, in forming the impossible dream, so to speak. But that impossible dream didn't have a plan B, only had a plan A. And I think it worked very well for us.
So from Italy, then you came into the New York harbor and you ended up in Pennsylvania near Nazareth. Is that correct? And built your first race car? Will you tell us about that?
Yeah, Nazareth is where I live right now, today. I'm the only one of the family that actually remained here. And I married a local lady, a wonderful lady, Deanne, and we raised our family here. And so we arrived there at 15, and 2 years later, we assembled 4 other buddies, and we decided to build our own race car to race locally. We discovered the track. We arrived there on a Thursday in 1955. On a Sunday night when the race was happening, that's when we discovered there was a track here. It was something very different from what we had visualized motor racing, a dirt track and half mile at the fairgrounds, but it looked very doable. So we decided 2 years later that, if we're going to start racing, we better start now. So at age 17, we started building a race car. And 2 years later, a race car was ready to go. And that's when we started. We were 19 years of age. Actually, we were not totally legal age-wise. You had to be 21 in those years to race professionally. But we got around it somehow. And we started, we had quite an auspicious beginning because we had 1 car, 2 drivers. And so there had to be a coin toss who was going to go first. And Aldo won the toss. And believe it or not, he won that qualifying heat and he won the race, the very first race we competed in. But because we had a loan at the local bank, and my parents didn't even know about, and a friend of ours, gentleman we befriended over the last, those couple of years, was quite a race fan, and he co-signed the note. So we got this loan, a total of $1,000 in those days. That was a big responsibility.
Wow.
But the first race, we earned a total of $150. So as you can see, we started paying off the loan, and we had a very good season. As a matter of fact, we won many races. As I said, we did all the things that you normally do. We did the crashing, the winning, and all that. But overall, between Aldo and I, we did very well. And there was a point system awarded where within a 150-mile radius, if you finish top 3 in points in any of the tracks, you qualify for the invitational race at the season end in Hatfield, Pennsylvania. And we both qualified for that. And I drove a car from someone else, a gentleman from Allentown, but Aldo drove our car. And during the qualifying heat, he had this horrendous crash, which basically determined his career ultimately. He was given his last rites actually that evening at the hospital. And he took a sabbatical the following year, but he continued racing for 10 more years until he had, in 69, he had another terrible accident in Des Moines, Iowa, driving a sprint car. And no fault of his own. Somebody in front of him, they had a blowout and a tire, and he just T-boned him and wound up in the grandstands almost.
Oh, my.
And so he had a lot of facial injuries and whatever. So he obviously had to retire from the sport at that point. But from my side, I was very fortunate, and none of those things happened to me. I was able to dodge some of those bullets, and my career actually continued for the next 36 some years, because I came officially out of Indy cars in 1994, but I raced 3 more times at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in France. So my last professional race was in the year 2000. So as you could see, I was very, very fortunate, very blessed to have been able to have such a long career, pretty much free of very serious injury.
So racing isn't just about the competition on the track or on the road course. There's also a business side to the sport. And I want to talk a little bit about the competition with you, and also about getting your son Michael started in racing at a really early age.
Well, here's the thing. You're right. I mean, the business is very complex, and there is a technical side, there is a business side, because it's a very expensive sport. As you can see, it's driven by sponsorship, and that's vital to be able to go on and arm yourself with that type of revenue to be able to satisfy what is needed to have, as tools, which is race cars, and the right people. These are people that usually are very much in demand because of their specialty. So you got to arm yourself with the best you can, and all of that is expensive as well. Now, going back to getting my kids started, which Michael and Jeff both were race drivers, and Michael, I was, like me, much more fortunate than Jeff. And he started first because he's the older one. But around age 9, I don't know why. I mean, I thought, well, might as well give him a taste of a go-kart. And I remember during summer, setting up a little bit of a track at a school parking lot here in Nazareth. And Michael, he took to it like duck to water, as they say. He just seemed like a natural right away. And so he started racing in a junior class and winning. And so Michael went through his career, through the ladder system very successfully, right to the very top of his career. And then he was one that was always eyeballing the business side of it. And he came out of the cockpit at age 42, he was still at the top of his game, but he just wanted to become an owner rather than a driver, which today you can see what is involved in. He has teams all over the world. You can see in Europe and Australia, America, where Jeff was not as fortunate as Michael. He had some serious injuries, especially in 92 at Indianapolis, where he almost lost both his legs, in this terrible accident that he had, which we're just so fortunate that he survived it. The impact was 84.7 Gs.
Oh, my.
And that, no fault of his own. A hub broke, a wheel came off during the race. And so that pretty much determined his career. But he pursued other interests in the sport. He's a very analytic type of person, and he's an instructor. He does well. Where, again, from that standpoint, we still had a lot of satisfaction as a family. You know that in 1991 and 1992, there were 4 members of our family qualified at Indy both years. And it never happened before or since, 4 members of the same family. It was myself, or my 2 sons, and my nephew John. It was Aldo's son. And you know that between Aldo and myself, there are actually a total of 8 race drivers in the family, and we both have 3rd generation. So you can see that we live and breathe and have very, very powerful fuel going through our veins.
So how about competing against one another? Have you and Michael also competed against one another? Was that one of those times?
Are you kidding? Michael and I were on podium in an IndyCar race 15 times.
Wow.
And we were first and second 5 times.
That's amazing.
Started on the front row of an IndyCar race 10 times. Do you know that Michael and I had the closest finish in IndyCar in Portland, 1986, 7/1000ths of a second.
That is so finite.
And I won.
You're one. Of course you did.
But he should have, because he had some fuel pickup problem. But anyway.
So let's look into the crystal ball or the future. And what's the future look like for Andretti Racing and specifically Andretti Global?
It's a work in progress. Everything, you always keep looking forward to expand. Michael is very, very ambitious. And I think his objectives are to enter be a team in Formula One. As you know, I've competed there, so he has as well. But he wants to be an entrant, an owner. And that's quite the program to be involved in. You're up against established factories, the Ferraris, and so on and so forth. And that's what he wants to do. Stay tuned about that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's growing. He's about to break ground on a new building that will house pretty much all of the entities that is involved in Indianapolis. And here again, he's involved nationally and internationally, trying to reach every angle of the sport. And that's a good thing because that's what we love.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a little bit about technology. We have a listener and a friend whose name is Kenneth, and he does some online racing, simulated racing. And he said, we're starting to see young drivers enter professional racing through sim racing rather than the traditional ladder system. What are your thoughts on sim racing?
Well, sim racing, I think it's a system that's very valuable. And I think it cuts back a lot on the potential testing as far as learning a circuit. It's as close as you're going to come to the real thing, obviously. It has its place, no question. Every major team has a simulator to be able to do like basic setups, and then you prove it in real time. So simulators are a wonderful tool today to arm yourself with. There's nothing better than getting a taste of something where you can make a mistake and not pay dearly for it. Even as a driver, sometimes if a drivers have to deal with a brand new venue where they've never seen it and had the opportunity to really ride on it, even with a rental car, if you will, to go in a race car in a simulator environment and try it. So it's something that's very used today by every major team. So it's technology that obviously is in very good use right now.
Very interesting. I have another question from a woman who's a local marketer. Her name is Amy, and she wanted to know if you'd read a book called The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein.
I have the book, yes, and I could teach him a few things.
I have not read the book, but after Googling it and studying a bit, it is intriguing to say the least. And then I know the book is told through the eyes of a dog named Enzo, which, of course, tied to racing. Yes. And she wondered if you had a pet.
My pet now is a parrot. His name is Gonzo. And he's been with me for about something like 35, 36 years.
Oh, wow.
I have to ask him again which one it is, but he tells me it's 36. And I had pets, I had dogs and so forth. I had Great Danes. And right now my daughter has a beautiful pug named Gabe. That's my middle name, by the way, Gabriel. We have pets in the family.
Let's talk a bit about COVID. Recently, we've seen so many changes in our lives just as a result of such a big pandemic. And I'm wondering how that has maybe changed your life, involvement with others, the socialization or lack of socialization, isolation during COVID. How did that really change your life, and how do you stay engaged today?
I like to think it did not change my life. It was a period where obviously I had to comply, rightfully so. The one thing that I resisted right from the very beginning, I didn't want to know anything about a new normal. I wanted to get back to normal, period. And so, tragedy did strike in that respect to my family. I lost my twin, Aldo, to COVID. So as you could see that, there's a price that we paid as a family, no question. But, did that change my life? Just for the period it did, yes, of course, everyone's. Mm. But my fight was to get back to what I knew, the life that I knew, not a new life.
That's really a good model. And it makes me wonder, you're so competitive and you really don't settle for mediocrity, I think, for yourself or for others. Where does this intense drive come from?
I don't know where it comes from. It's just that if you're driven about something. I'm competitive, yes, because you derive satisfaction if you win on something. And if you're not competitive, that means you're blasé. There's just nothing really matters to you. I mean, it's not just racing. I mean, we have businesses, and you want to be able to thrive with your businesses and get the best out of everyone. So all of the individuals that are part of it, they can all enjoy it and advance themselves and make a better life and all these things. I mean, to me, I never thought there was anything wrong about being competitive. I think it keeps you engaged always. And that's what I like. I like to get up in the morning and have, I got stuff to do. I have things to do and looking forward to creating something or just doing something with yourself.
Being productive and
Being
giving
productive.
back. And sure.
Yeah.
And there's something that I've read also about some of your community outreach efforts. And one of the things I know that you've done in your past is you've delivered Meals on Wheels to recipients in your hometown. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that and what that was like for you and for the recipients.
Well, we've done that the last few years just to sort of, if we can create a little more attention to what's going on in that respect. And because of doing that, my daughter Barbie does that regularly. She takes the time from her work to go and do that. And by also doing so, you can see the need for it. The individuals that you take the meal to, you can see that that's probably the only person that they're going to be seen that particular day or for days to come until. So again, it's your community, that sometimes it makes you feel good if you can contribute in some ways. So when I'm invited or asked upon, I just enjoy actually doing it, and I feel good about it at the end of that day.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. Looking back in photos of you through the years, it appears you found the fountain of youth, and I want to know what your secret is to health and wellness.
I have a daughter. She makes sure that I eat healthy and all that sort of thing. You almost feel like you know what you need to do, but you like to have somebody else to be able to criticize if you don't. Like when I know that I'm going to be driving the race car, you have to be in certain physical conditions. So you always have a reason, you have to have a reason, for doing all these things because they're always a big task, if you will. Like my daughter, if I cheat sometimes on eating some things that she doesn't want me to, I said, I just went to confession, so everything's forgiven. So we kid about that. But all of that, I mean, it's great to try to feel good. So that's the incentive that you have. As we all know, health is everything. If you don't have health, you have nothing. And I try to take care of myself the best way that I think possible. I know that I cheat here and there, like everyone else. But at the end of the day, I think I'm kind of staying the root, if you will.
I've got just a few real simple questions that I'm going to call a speed round that I created just for you. Favorite book?
Favorite book? What's it like out there?
Favorite movie?
To Please a Lady.
Favorite music?
Opera.
Favorite opera performer?
Currently Bocelli, and Pavarotti was the all-time favorite. Maria Callas as a soprano.
Who would you like to trade places with for 24 hours?
That's a good question, actually. Probably Max Verstappen.
And what's on your bucket list these days?
Well, I satisfied one of my ultimate bucket lists just a couple of weeks ago to be in basically a modern Formula One car, and a circuit in which I did at Laguna Seca and also in Austin during the Grand Prix weekend. So I got to be searching for the next bucket list.
How does a race car driver leave racing at the track when they go on the streets?
You don't really relate the two, quite honestly. A lot of people think, I think us race car drivers, we're as frustrated as anybody else when you're in traffic. You feel like you could nudge somebody a little bit and maybe get them, especially when you're at the stoplight and the thing goes green and they count to 10 before they go and all that sort of thing. So it's frustrating like everybody else.
Okay, I've got just two more questions. One is, it's relative to advice you might have gotten from an older adult or a parent that at the time you thought, boy, that's just silly, but it rings true to you now in your everyday life.
I would say please and thank you are two good words to just use as often as possible. Simple as that.
And Mario, what is it that you do to squeeze the day?
I have so much on my plate that every morning that I wake up, I just have something specific that I'll just focus on. I always have something to do. And Amy knows, my assistant here at the office, whether I'm on the road or here, I'm always doing something. I never lay around or, look back. I try to make myself productive, and that's when I feel good at the end of the day.
Thank you for joining us today. And what an amazing life of leadership we're witnessing from interviews and stories such as yours. Now we challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day.